So I think, so a couple of things, first of all, about me as we go through this speed date of the next 20 minutes. I firmly believe in this intersectionality of the 4 Ps: people, planet, profit, and purpose. The next thing is that ecosystems, I think, are a means for organizations to really go beyond their singular boundaries to really generate collective value shared around, around shared problems, and that the ability for us to solve really big societal problems is really reliant on ecosystem mindset and ecosystem participation and collaboration. And my third is exactly the point that Maria was making in her section, which is really, I, for one, am not interested in a world where Web3 is essentially built on Web2 principles. So this whole ownership of our own data, ownership of our own identity, the way that we, as individuals, as consumers, monetize our value in those data, the data that we generate as content and the identities that we have in these different channels, I think needs really to be put within our own control. So those are 3 important things to know about me, and this is where it's going to start to get into how this perception around the Internet of Things, and lastly, the economy of things. So what has the Internet done? The Internet has effectively digitized assets of information, digitized information, media, entertainment, and with the advent of computers, mobile devices, access to those different digital assets have proliferated and really accelerated. The liquefaction of all of these different assets and information has generated the whole Web2 economy and strengthened how big platforms, as well as hyperscalers, have really succeeded in this world. So when we think about the Internet of Things, it's effectively going to be doing the same for the physical world. Liquidity is really around getting to that fundamental value proposition, the value lever within a single asset, and the way that that asset can be monetized. So when we're thinking about IoT, and we're seeing a lot of examples already, right, within a lot of these different industries, these industries are accelerating on the use of their IoT, and certainly the last 3 years have contributed to this acceleration of digitalization, and the Internet of Things, in terms of the number of investment, the venture capitalists that are investing in IoT devices and companies has really exploded. So in agriculture, for example, one example is Yara, is a Norwegian company that is particularly focused on fertilizers, chemical company. And they have created a digital platform for farmers. And through that digital platform, they're connecting 620 million farm holders that is looking at and leveraging data that is captured from IoT around weather prediction, soil quality, all of that effectively to drive improved yields for those farmers. And it's a global platform now. In supply chain, one interesting one from IBM is the IBM Food Trust. So IBM Food Trust effectively brings together a network of food producers, wholesalers, distributors, retailers, effectively to bring together transparency around that food supply chain, to also help secure farmers' ability to go from seed to shelf, as well as help secure the food supply for this world. So 14% of food that is actually wasted from the farm onto the retail shelf, specifically. In the automotive space, there's a terrific one from Vodafone, which has developed a digital asset broker platform, and what they're doing is effectively leveraging identity and digital payments within IoT SIMs to effectively drive this capability of electric vehicles being able to charge themselves, electric vehicles charging themselves on the charge points. So all of these transactions are seamless, enabled by this identity within a connected digital asset broker device. And they're basically creating now an ecosystem of participants around this automotive space. So just some numbers, because I love to work in facts. The first is that we actually surpassed, IoT devices actually surpassed the number of humans back in 2019, 8.6 billion at the time. We effectively doubled IoT devices back in 2021, 2022. And there's a forecast now that I'm seeing, certainly across all the different analyst reports, that we're going to be seeing double that, 29 billion by 2030. So the proliferation of IoT devices is a massive one and accelerating very quickly. McKinsey has basically estimated the potential value that can be unlocked by IoT devices of between $6 to $13 trillion US until 2030, and that's spanning both consumer and industrial IoT. So on the consumer side, obviously, because we've been staying home a lot more, there's a lot of investment from our side, investing in our own home security, home comfort, IoT, smart IoT devices within the home. On the industrial side, because of this whole transformation and acceleration of digitalization across industries, this is really around leveraging how IoT can help in manufacturing, how they can help on the factory floor, the shop floor, the retail shop floor, the hospital floor, et cetera. So all of these things are really contributing to the unlocking of potential within the IoT space. And I think thirdly, this is an interesting number, 55 zettabytes. So 1 gigabyte is a trillion, so there's 1 trillion gigabytes within a zettabyte. So if I was going to make this a little bit more real in terms of an example, 55 zettabytes basically is equal to, if we had 1 gigabyte for each brick within the Great Wall of China, we would have 268 million bricks within the Great Wall of China. So this number effectively represents 14,190 Great Walls of China in terms of data volumes. Okay? So that's going to make it a little bit more real. So how do we actually unlock all of that value within each of those little data, those bricks of data? And this is where I think it's really interesting to now start to look at the economy of things. So if you think about each one of these little icons representing a digital twin of themselves, how many sensors do you think a smart parking lot could generate on its own? How many sensors and data could a connected car generate on its own? And I think we were talking earlier about standards and values. So standards and interoperability standards on the automotive sphere is scarily complex, right? Smart cities, advertising, weather. Weather has a tremendous number of sources. If you can imagine the network of weather sensors that we have around the world, all generating different types of data, humidity, sun index, et cetera. Utilities, and then also just the whole charging network itself. So all of these things are actually around creating the digital twins that drive insights to a network, an ecosystem of assets. And when we think about the economy of things, it's really about making those physical assets searchable, indexable, and then monetizable. Because this effectively is the same way that we changed, the internet into liquid marketplaces. It's the same way that we would do these IoT assets into liquid marketplaces for the economy of things. What does that really mean? So I think if you're thinking about, this is an automotive example that we've developed. There's a lot more than what you saw in the previous slide in terms of all the different participants. Each of these different participants effectively have relationships to other participants within the ecosystem, and that's why they're an ecosystem partner. The higher the number of connections between participants, the stronger the ecosystem basically is, and the higher the collective value that ecosystem could potentially generate. So what is the portion of that $6 trillion to $12 trillion value could actually be unlocked by harnessing the power of all of these different connections? Because ecosystems are really meant to drive network effects. They're meant to push organizations and individuals beyond their current single boundaries to really look at how collective value can be generated by sharing, by openly sharing, by trustfully sharing, by securely sharing data amongst one another. So when we think about that data, the data platform itself, what does that really look like? So let me give you a little bit of an example I'm going to walk you through here. So on the Internet of the Economy of Things, there's obviously this component of decentralized identity. So it's an identity that is anchored with a consumer or a driver in this case. And in this particular case, it's also an identity assigned to the car. So when Maria was, I'm going to use Maria's example a lot, where they use ChatGPT to look at that journey. It's all building up, because even I think the session after me is focused on Skoda, right? So this is going to be great. So, so I think when you're thinking about what is the behavioral data that's actually captured from the driver perspective in that passport that you have, the ID passport that you have as a driver, matched and paired with the ID passport of the car, you suddenly have a number of different interactions through connected driving experiences that can be facilitated with device-to-device payments. So when we're thinking about how an electric vehicle goes to charge itself at a charge point, goes and gets gas at a regular fuel stop, goes and pays for parking, goes and gets their car washed, goes and gets food along the way, you could effectively leverage this ability to have a payment mechanism within the car to facilitate and transcend all of the different applications that need to be on your phone to go and pay for these things, which I think is a really interesting concept. And then what happens from here is that, so you've got the identity, you've got the behavior from the driver and the car, you've also got their transactions, and now you actually have a means to grab all of that data and start to share that data to drive different ecosystem type use cases. So for example, utilizing information around the driving behavior of the match between the car and that particular driver, that particular pattern of mobility. What could you have as offers from InsurTech? Pay-as-you-go insurance as you're driving in. Could you actually have, within the supply chain of this interaction between a car and charge points, et cetera, aggregate that data further and say, is there some elements here of green finance that I can get as a fleet operator for my vehicles? Because I'm demonstrating that I have a higher percentage of vehicles that are going green, that are electric, et cetera. And could I actually leverage green finance instruments to help me within my operations and also show that I have a reduction of my carbon impact, et cetera, benchmarked against other of my competitors? Real-time contextual offers. This is really around saying, this is about real-time data that's coming in from that driving behavior to basically say, well, I've got my driver, I've got my preferences, I have my passport of things that I like to do and things that I like to buy. I'm in my car, and I'm driving a specific direction. And along the way, insights coming from food retailers are basically then able to send offers through a channel that I prefer, either on my onboard dashboard in the car or through my loyalty application for my vehicle on my phone, to say, well, you know, Raquel, if you wanted to stop, you know, it looks like you need to stretch your legs a little bit. 30 minutes from now, you've got your favorite restaurant coming up, just, you know, two kilometers off the highway. Do you want to come in and reserve a table, reserve your meal so that you go in, go out, and come out? So these are all things that are basically use cases that can help create that collective value from just these simple but yet very rich data sets. So this is where I think this is really the ability to really drive that collective value, where you have a minimum viable ecosystem of data partners with consent, right? And control over what data they're sharing and how they're contributing that data to the ecosystem, being used to actually drive value, not just to me as a consumer, as a driver, but also to the whole collective industrial participants. So how do you actually make this work? So one major thing is obviously you have to make people really want to be part of it, right? Because the data sharing piece is a really tricky one. So simple governance, very clear rules around engagement. There's effectively three different ecosystem participants when you think about data. There's the orchestrator of the data, there's the provider of the data, and then there's consumers of data. So orchestrators of data are organizations that effectively bring together, they set the rules for the participants, they aggregate the data, they monitor the activities of all of the participants as well. They provide the ability to aggregate that data, and also on top of that, deliver value-added products and services that are targeting that specific segment of participants. So those orchestrators are critical to enabling the right governance and also incentive model for the sharing of data coming from the data providers themselves. So data providers are responsible for the licensing conditions around the data that they have, and also ensuring that their data is secure, that it's compliant, and that privacy rules are adhered to for the data sets that they provide to the ecosystem as well. And the data consumers are effectively those that download data sets or streams of data, but they also can play a role of giving data back to the ecosystem or back to the marketplace as well. So all of these things need to be really set clear. Fundamentally, it is around providing any kind of charter or governance, commercial charter around, governance charter around these data ecosystems needs to be founded in key principles such as providing individual autonomy and empowerment to the participants on that data. And then secondly, making sure that there is a clear incentive models around the data sets that they use. And also having to ensuring that each organization, each participant prioritizes equally the good of the ecosystem or the commercial performance of the ecosystem at the same level that their individual performance. Because if they ever try to drive their individual performance over the good of the ecosystem, then the ecosystem is going to fail. So the whole point around the governance and incentive mechanism is that this should enable a self-financing model for that data marketplace or data ecosystem. That's really key to make sure that it thrives as a marketplace and ecosystem. Secondly, of course, is trust, privacy, and security. There's no way to get around this. There shouldn't be a way to get around this because it does need to be absolutely transparent for all participants to understand exactly what is the data that they're getting. Are they allowed to even have it? So you want to do away with the barriers to consuming that data or providing that data. And there is actually a role for orchestrators to also provide additional services to manage and help those providers manage consent and manage the business rules governing sharing of that data more globally. And then thirdly, it's really around standards. So low barriers to data sharing is really around saying we need to be able to work across standards because we know that enables interoperability between different participants to mix and match data sets amongst each other. And that actually means that you have a much better adoption of data of the ecosystem, participation within the ecosystem. And by the way, once it becomes a standard, then it basically becomes a competitive differentiation because everybody else will need to be aligning to your standard if they want to participate in that ecosystem themselves. So I think that's a really interesting way to create a thriving data economy, is thinking about what are the standards and making those standards easier for participants to really come in and play together. So when it comes to looking at yourself as a participant within the data economy, what are some of the key characteristics? Well, one key thing is to obviously have unique data that's specific to you, that is part of your competitive differentiation. So this is, high quality, absolutely needs to be there, so have high quality unique data. The second part is to make this easily discoverable, because there's nothing worse, and I've seen this over the past several years that I've been working in this space, is that you can have the best data in the world, the best high quality, the best value, but it's not going to be any good if people don't know what it is and can't find it or even access it or use it. So this is again grounding the experience in user-centric design around how you want those data assets to be discoverable, how you want to work with third parties or the data providers who both provide data as well as services and applications on that data to be able to work together? How do you onboard them? How do you offboard them, et cetera? So this is really around user-centric design around discovery and availability of use of that data as well. This right incentive model is really an interesting one. So I think when you're thinking about how, because there may be a position that you want to take if you're thinking about creating a data marketplace or data economy, where you subsidize different participants within the economy itself for different reasons. So that basically either is in favor of generating a lot of adoption or a lot of content within the marketplace itself for a little bit of time, and then understanding the roles and the monetization, the revenue flows between the different participants within the ecosystem itself. So developing the right incentive model for data providers is key, because that's what people are going to be buying. That's what people are going to be developing on. That's what people are going to be interested in understanding of how they could leverage that data or mix and match that data to really drive operational efficiency within their organization, or even cross-industry efficiency or innovation. So that's fundamentally important. Second, fourth is actually around cultivating multiple sources of data outside, again, of your own boundaries, because there's only so much innovation and digitalization that you can do, or transformation you can do using your own set of data. There's always going to be, I think, the mindset of the ecosystem mindset is really looking at reaching outwards from your own boundaries to really understand what other data sets could be complementary to what you're doing that drives that innovation to a different layer, or is it basically additive or incremental, or then focusing on the exponential innovation that can drive that. There's a number of open data sets, for example, that organizations can tap into that would be relevant for their industry, that should be in there. And it's also, I think, around gathering partners, ecosystem partners within that data economy as well, that can complement what you're doing. And then this is the fifth one and last one, is really how to enable the crowdsourcing. So again, once you've actually built this foundation of data and you made it discoverable, you've given people the right incentives, you've given the ability to broaden the horizon around the data sets that you're using, how do you actually fundamentally create the mechanism to enable folks to participate in that? And that means not just data providers and data processors, but also developers. So how do you enable that crowdsourcing of innovation and value out of that collective ecosystem? That's going to be fundamental to the thriving of that play. So 3 things that I'm actually thinking about right now as we go through this session is, how do we have equitable access to that data? And how do we prevent the creation of monopolies, of what we've seen within Web 2? So these are things that I consistently think about when I'm talking about ecosystem mindsets and data economies with clients, because this is how we actually get, I think, more collective value, and certainly ensure that individuals as ourselves have a real role to play within this the future of economy of things. This is effectively, for me, a key principle. How do we ensure that individual control and of our own data and identities, that I can make my own informed decisions about how I want to share that data and use that data within the economy of things? How do I get value from sharing that data as opposed to just giving it away for free? And then lastly, how do we ensure that marginalized communities can still participate in the economy of things? So as we're building out the frameworks and the charters, like government's charters, the commercial frameworks, how do we ensure that those communities are not left behind, and that they also can contribute greatly and be a participant in the economy of things, which we know is going to be coming out in the next few years as a key engine of growth for many organizations and industries. I don't have any. So that one's double. There you go. So I'm actually done. So I don't know if there's other questions.